If getting totally embarrassed by Vice President Kamala Harris in front of more than 67 million debate watchers, by the way, this week made Donald Trump furious, and you know that it did, it's pretty clear the rest of the week has only added to his rage. So let's just take a look at some of the things that are probably making Donald Trump very, very mad right now. I mean, just this morning, a Des Moines Register poll showed Harris cutting Trump's lead in Iowa, of all places, to just 4 points. Just to give you a sense of what that means, the same exact poll had Trump leading Joe Biden by 18 points in June. Trump won Iowa by about 9 points in 2016 and 2020. Hasn't been a swing state since 2008. Then last night at a Congressional Black Caucus dinner in Washington, Harris mocked Trump for his line in the debate about having, quote, concepts of a plan. A very mockable line. All week long, she filled stadiums with tens of thousands of people in crucial swing states like North Carolina and Pennsylvania. And she, of course, notched the endorsement of Taylor Swift, which is clearly still driving Trump nuts. If you happen to click over to Truth Social this morning, here's what you saw in all caps. I hate Taylor Swift. Clearly, it's not under his skin at all. I mean, that debate was so galvanizing for Harris and so embarrassing for Donald Trump that Karl Rove basically called Trump stupid in the editorial pages of the Wall Street Journal. So yes, Trump was embarrassed on Tuesday night, and he's been embarrassed every day since then. But in response, he isn't retooling his campaign team. He isn't planning a bus tour across the Midwest to connect with voters. Of course not. He's going back to the same xenophobic and racist playbook that he thinks won him the election in 2016. He's simply trying to appeal to his base with fear. Fear of immigrants, fear of Black and Latino communities, fear of basically anyone who doesn't look like him and his running mate, J.D. Vance. And the most dangerous step he has taken this week is doubling down on a claim debunked by the local police, the mayor, and even the Republican governor of Ohio, that Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, are eating pets. It was a claim that originated with a Facebook post from one person who later disavowed it. But none of the facts matter to Trump. They never have. He prompted the explosion of this conspiracy theory himself by elevating it on the debate stage on Tuesday, later vowing mass deportation starting in Springfield, Ohio. The result of all this? A city being terrorized right now. Today, Wittenberg University in Springfield has been put on high alert after someone threatened to shoot Haitians on campus. Yesterday, a bomb threat forced 2 hospitals in the city to go into lockdown, and multiple schools and municipal buildings were evacuated or closed on both Thursday and Friday due to similar threats, at least one of which used hateful language toward Haitians. NBC News also reports that a neo-Nazi group, which pushed the false claim in the first place, is now doxing local residents and officials who have publicly spoken out. And surprise, surprise, Trump is doing absolutely nothing to calm things down. When asked yesterday if he denounced those bomb threats in Springfield, he definitely didn't say yes.
Did you denounce the bomb threats in Springfield, Ohio?
I don't know what happened with the bomb threats. I know that it's been taken over by illegal migrants, and that's a terrible thing that happened. Springfield was this beautiful town, and now they're going through hell.
So when the question is, do you denounce bomb threats that are terrorizing an American city, the answer should be unambiguous. But of course, Trump's wasn't. And of course, in the next breath, he kept lying about Haitian migrants who were in this country legally. Look, we have seen this pattern before. Trump stoking conspiracy theories and then commenting on them as if he's some casual observer. He sets fire to the building, continues pouring gasoline all over it, and then wonders aloud about why it's burning. This is what he does. Just ask anyone who was in the Capitol on January 6th. So yes, Donald Trump may be a buffoon who was roundly ridiculed for his comments at the debate, but that does not make him any less dangerous. And I think Kamala Harris captured that dynamic perfectly all the way back at the Democratic convention.
In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious.
Joining me now are 2 people who never hold back, who I know are going to have a lot of thoughts about all of this. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas and conservative attorney George Conway. Congresswoman, let me start with you. And I really want to start with Donald Trump's refusal to condemn the bomb threats. What was your reaction to that?
You know, my heart breaks that this election is close because this comes down to just some basic norms and principles of what we should see in leadership for the greatest country in the world. And it doesn't look like this. Yes, Springfield is going through hell, but they're going through hell because the guy that says that he wants to be the commander-in-chief is actually bringing that hell to their footsteps. He decided to amplify a lie on a national debate stage, and that is harming American citizens. That is a problem. When I talk about MAGA, I talk about the fact that when we swore in finally in January, that we swore to defend against those that are coming against us, whether they are domestic or international. And right now, I feel like MAGA in general, they are threats to us domestically. And we see it time and time again. And I think that's why you see so many national leaders, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, coming together to say there is only one person qualified to be the commander-in-chief, and that is Kamala Harris.
No question. There have been a lot of Republicans who have come out. A letter signed this morning by former people who worked for Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, and I want to talk about that too, but I want to ask you, George, I mean, you have been warning about this pattern, about stoking, about kind of feeding into conspiracies, about letting it sit out there and doing nothing to calm it. What has been your reaction as you watch the events of the last couple of days and the absolute terror that has been unleashed on the people of Springfield, Ohio as a result?
Well, I mean, it's what I've been saying for years is Donald Trump is a sociopath, and sociopaths lie relentlessly. They have no empathy or caring for other people. I mean, who answers the question? Who refuses to say that they condemn a bomb threat? A sociopath, a psychopath, somebody who has no care, no feeling for other people, and only cares about himself. And it's all about him. It's all about how he thinks he can spur people on into violence to support him. And, you know, he's just a dangerous person. And that is exactly why you're seeing conservatives like me and the 17 people from the Reagan administration and Liz Cheney and so many others speaking out and saying we can't have him back because he's a danger. He's a danger even when he's not. He's just a danger campaigning out there. He's causing all this trouble and riot and not rioting, but you know, danger in Springfield, Ohio. I mean, that's what he does.
You know, one of the things, and I mentioned this, and I would love both of your thoughts on it, is that this is a pattern, right? Mm-hmm. He loves to go after, and this is his playbook, communities that don't look like him. Yeah. He goes after Black communities, Latino communities, communities that have large numbers of immigrants. It is this fear-based approach. He's doing it in Aurora, Colorado as well. What should people understand and know about that? I mean, these are people's lives. Haitian families are keeping their kids inside. Schools are shut down. Hospitals are shut down. What should people know about that and the impact on communities? You see the communities impacted.
Yeah, no, listen, here's one of the things. Donald Trump loves to say things such as they're illegal, right? Every time he talks about an immigrant, he makes it seem as if they have done something nefarious. And it's not true. Just because they are immigrants does not mean that there's anything illegal about them. And what is so wild to me is that they never think about the fact that they literally have children of immigrants. Donald Trump is married to an immigrant as well as J.D. Vance. Your children are children of immigrants, and you are going out and attacking other immigrants every chance that you get. And honestly, again, it just comes down to basic decency in this country. I think the reason that you're seeing the polling that you see in Iowa is because people are waking up to the fact that we can't live this way. This can't be the guy that is supposed to protect us when it comes to people that are coming out against us. This is the same guy that could not say on that debate stage that he wanted Ukraine to win. He could not do that. This guy doesn't understand who our friends are, and he also doesn't understand who we are as a nation, which we are a country of immigrants. And the demonization of any group of people, whether it's Black folk and saying, you know what, we need to go out and make sure that officers have immunity to just go ahead and kill them criminally, or whether we're talking about those that he says, oh, all of the Hispanics that are coming in, they're going to rape your children. Listen, the problem isn't the people coming in. The problem is this guy and his people here that are doing the bomb threats throughout our country. Domestic terrorism is a real thing, and he is the guy that stokes it.
This is very much an American story, the city of Springfield, Ohio, which people forget. They needed people to do jobs. They brought in people to do jobs. They asked people, Asian immigrants, to come to the town to do these jobs. More to say on that, but I want to keep talking to both of you guys. George, I always hate to ask people to get in the mind of Donald Trump, but you are very good at getting in the mind of Donald Trump. I mean, what struck me about his behavior is it feels to me like, yes, sociopathic behavior, as you said, to quote you, but desperation. I mean, this feels like desperation. Yeah. When he feels under attack, when he's behind, he behaves in this way. But how has this struck you in that regard, in terms of what it says about his mental state?
Well, he's reaching his final destination, which is complete decompensation. He doesn't, none of his tricks are working anymore. We're on to them. They don't excite anybody anymore. He's losing in the polls. He has to try to make things up. And his own vice presidential candidate on another network today basically said, we're making up stories in order to win this election. And, it's not working for him, and he knows it, and he knows he's going down. And the more he feels that he's going down, remember, he's running not just for president, he's running from prison. You're going to see him engage in more and more desperate behavior. And that's what you see with I hate Taylor Swift, is he's just lashing out. And, his people have lost control over him. And the only person who seems to have any control over him is the person who's telling him or whispering in his ear or doing something to tell him that everything's great, you're amazing. And that's Laura Loomer. And that's where this is the ultimate implosion. And we're watching it live, and it's going to get worse.